Hey everybody, I wanted to show you guys my process of making pinch pots out of a ball of clay. This is some of the clay that I wedged earlier in a video. Um, so I have a piece about this big, and I actually have two of them because I'm going to try and make two to attach together to make like an egg shape or a hollow sphere of some sort, okay? So I have two pieces that are really soft. I'm going to do one of them, and I have some off to the side that I've already done that I'll show you how to assemble together once you've gotten two of these made, okay? So we want to make sure that our ball's nice and round. It doesn't have to be perfect. If you feel like it needs to, you can hit it with the butt of your palm on any spots that are high. You don't want to just roll it in your hands like this because all that does is really dry it out. It doesn't move the clay around where you want it. So I just lightly tap where any of the bumps are. So I can start out with more of a smooth ball. So you're just looking for anything that's higher than the rest, and you're just going to tap it really quick with the butt of your hand right here, this little meaty part that works your thumb. So that's pretty good. I usually find the least perfect side like this, and that's where I'm going to put my thumb in. I'm going to make sure I have fingers underneath because that's how I can tell how deep I go, okay? So using my fingers, I'll feel how close my thumb is to the bottom because I'll be able to feel the pressure there. So we start like this. You can do it one-handed. I like to have another hand just in case. I'm going to push this thumb down into the middle of the ball. All right, so it's like I have, like Tom Thumb with the plum on his thumb. So once you have it in there, I don't push it all the way down to where I can completely feel my finger just as soon as I see pressure. And now I'm going to use these fingers nice and tight together. You don't want them splayed out like this. We want them nice and tight. And I'm going to give a little squeeze, just a little squeeze, and I'm going to turn it and squeeze and turn it and squeeze. All right? You don't want to turn enough that all of your fingers are now at the other end. So right now I have fingerprints right here. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? Not really using my pinky. When I move it, I'm probably only going to move about a finger and a half, and squeeze, and keep going all the way around. Remember, don't move a long distance, just a short distance, maybe about a finger and a half. All right, now look how big the hole is on the inside, and see that I've started to make progress on this. Now, I don't really like how cornered those are, so I'm going to go back and I'm going to start right here and do tiny little squeezes quickly all the way around. And now as I work, I'm going to move up this direction with my fingers. So initially my fingers were here. Now I'm going to do them right here, and I'm going to squeeze and turn. It's just a little squeeze. I'm starting to feel a workout right here in my thumb. So if you start to get a hand cramp, you might want to stretch your fingers out. You can use your hands to do so. So I'll just keep going. We're trying to get the top of this. I'd say personally, I like it thinner than my pinky. A little bit thicker than maybe a pencil. Because I'm going to manipulate it around a little bit after this. So we're going to keep squeezing as we go up. And if you want to make sure that it stays nice and tall and not splayed out like this, then you're going to pull up and in, right, instead of out like this. So you want more pressure on the outside than on the inside. Just little squeezes at a time. If you try and move too fast, the clay will crack. This clay is pretty soft, probably the consistency of Play-Doh, like you would get straight out of the jar. So it is thinner than my pinky. Let's see, where's my pencil? It's almost the thickness of my pencil. I'm probably going to go a little thinner than that, but it's really feels kind of heavy on the bottom. So I'm going to go back to the bottom, and with my thumb inside, I'm going to do a little bit more all the way around. You want to make sure that it's the same thickness. So if you feel something that feels thicker than other areas, that's where you want to give a little squeeze. This little area is a little thicker. And I just keep working around and going towards the top, remembering to pull in more than pushing out so that it stays tall and doesn't end up like a giant wide saucer. We're looking for a bowl here because we're going to attach them to make an egg. All right, so I've got something pretty nice here. There are still some bumps and lumps. So while I hold it in one hand, I'm just going to go around and assess with my other hand where I need to squeeze. Try and make sure that I keep it in the camera. I've zoomed in for this. All right, you want it nice and smooth on the inside too. In fact, I personally think the inside is more important with these because it's easier to fix it now rather than later. I'm going to make sure that there's no bits here that are thicker than others and make sure that they're all about the same height. Now, you might notice that this is not perfectly straight. That's pretty normal for me. So anyway, once it sets up a little bit more, it's easier to fix some of these things because we can use tools like this. This is called a rib. This is a metal version. It's made out of steel. This is a wooden rib. This one has a curved side and a straight side. And these little notches and holes are so that you can hang on to it even when your hand's wet. I really like the metal rib. There are even plastic ones like this that are bendable. They have really hard ones. This one's really hard. You can't bend it, but it's also plastic. Again, you're usually going to have a hole in the middle so that you can hang on to it when it gets wet. I kind of like the metal one, and when we use these, we're not applying a lot of pressure. We just apply a little bit of pressure, and you can use it to smooth out the sides. So see the difference in that and that? And I barely remove any clay at all. The idea is not to remove the clay, but to just move it to where it needs to be with gentle pressure. So you can go around like this and get it pretty smooth. You might have little bits here. If you don't clean it off regularly, you'll get little doodads that come off. All right, that's a lot better. So I'm going to set this one that's a little bit soft off to the side. We want these to firm up a little bit before we try and attach them because we're going to use pressure to get them together, okay? So I'm going to put this one off to the side, and just like on a cooking show, I'm going to pull two that are already done out of the oven. Oh my goodness, look at that. They're already done. All right, so here's two I did earlier. When I did my two, I made sure that they matched up so that they would evenly fit together. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you really want to not have big gaps and holes and wrinkles and things like that, okay? Now, in order to get these together, we have to have glue. And in clay or ceramics, that glue is called slip, and I showed you guys a little bit of that in a previous video. Here's the slip now that it's been soaking for a couple of hours and stirred up. And so it's about the thickness of a thick milkshake. It's fairly smooth. It's not perfect. So we're going to use that as glue. But before we put the glue on, we need to rough up the edges so that glue has something to stick to. Okay? So you can use, this is called a fettling knife. It's sharp, but not really as sharp as a steak knife. I made my own handle for one because the handle came off. You can either use this like this. You could use a butter knife for this. You could use a fork. You probably want to, if you do that, you want to dedicate that utensil to these kinds of projects. So this is one way of doing it. I'm just tapping into it. This is called scoring, all right? You're roughing up the surface in order to make sure they stick. You could also use what's called a needle tool. These are very sharp. You need to be careful with these. So if you ask somebody who had me, oh, I guess it was 2 years ago now, we were washing tools. I kind of like this because it gets it nice and rough over this. So I like it roughed up more because then I have a sure sign that it's going to get stuck together. So anyway, when you're washing these and we're using these tools that are sharp like this and the steel rib, if you were to draw this across your finger like that, you could definitely cut yourself. Same thing with this one. And I actually got stabbed with one of these and ended up in the not the actual ER, but one of those clinics where you walk in and you wait for hours with a bunch of other sick people, because one of these stuck into the palm of my hand. I think it was this hand, right around here, and of this needle, probably only that much was sticking out. So, and all of that was in my hand. I survived. I didn't have a scar. Luckily, nothing got stuck in my hand. And anyway, it was kind of scary for the whole class. And although there's one kid who always says, I'm so sorry, it was my fault. It really wasn't their fault. So I've got one done. We need both of them done, okay? So I'm going to score this one too. I'm going to go a little faster with this one. If you make sort of a mess with this, it's not that big of a deal because there's plenty of time to clean everything up. The more mess you do make, however, there's more to clean up. This one has a little hole right here that we're going to fill with a coil that I've already made. All right, so we're nice and rough. And there's a couple ways you could do this. If you have a big pot like this, you could actually take this and stick it right down in there until it touches and get a little bit on there. You could also do it this way, where we use one of our wooden tools and we just sort of paint it on. I've seen people dip a fork or a spoon. This is kind of like, you know, buttering bread, I guess. So we get our slip on there and we have it on the other. And I'm going to press them together, and what's going to keep them from collapsing is the air that we're trapping inside. So sometimes when it's sort of bumpy, I've already sort of made marks to figure out where they're going to fit together best. I didn't do that this time. So before I really squeeze, we're just going to look at it and see how they fit. All right, I think I got them pretty close. Here we go. I'm going to squeeze them together. I'm really applying a lot of pressure. We got an issue here because it's not quite the same level, so I'm going to squeeze that out and press again. Okay, so now we can use one of the wooden tools. This is a different kind of tool. They're a lot longer. It's more like this one that I have in my slip, but it's not covered in slip. And while I hold this, I can scrape off some of this extra and put it back in the bin. As long as clay hasn't been fired in a kiln, or I guess some students might call it baking, it's not really baking because we're going to get up to a really high temperature that would completely burn anything else. We call it firing. Once it's fired in the kiln, you won't be able to recycle this, but until that happens, you can always add water to this and rehydrate and reuse over and over and over and over again, okay? So unless clay has gotten something really weird in it that is not going to burn up like newspaper or hair or, you know, something like that, then it can be recycled and reused over and over and over again. I actually prefer recycled clay, so I'm just going around and pressing together again to make sure that it's really attached. Okay. And because I'm one of those extra people, in order to make sure that that seam is really, really, really tight and completely sturdy, I am now going to take what I just cleaned up and made neat, and I'm going to scratch it up again. And I usually like to scratch both directions all the way around. I don't think we really need to today. But, you know, I have to be extra, so I'm going to do it. The idea behind this time is we're trying to get all the fibers of the clay, even though they really don't have fibers, but like we're trying to get everything. Oh, shoot. Okay. I got a little hole. We're going to make sure that that's sealed, because if it has an actual hole that goes all the way through, then our air is not going to stay in there. So we're trying to make sure that instead of it sitting like this, they start to do like this, and then they lock together. I have a coil that I already rolled out here. So usually I've done them this thick, but I've decided recently that this is a little too thick, so I left it this thick so you could see. I'm going to move this out of the way. When I roll it, I'm going to make sure that I go all the way past where I started and apply even pressure so I don't end up with a flat coil. And you can run your hand back and forth like this. It's even light pressure. If you press too hard, you're going to have a hard time and you're going to start ending up with a flat coil. I'm going to go for a much smaller coil than normal now. Because I decided I did too much cleanup on the old ones. And we need just enough coil to wrap all the way around. So that should be plenty. I have now smashed it and flattened it, which is fine. Alright, so here's my coil that I made. I sort of flattened it. We can do a little scoring. It's pretty wet, so it's not that big of a deal. And now I'm going to go back and I'm going to just ever so slightly paint this on, because I want it to fill in all those holes so I don't encapsulate air in there. If you do it differently, if you're somebody who does stuff like this and you do it differently, please let me know in the comments, because I'm always about learning something new. Just, you know, be nice about it. So now I'm going to put my coil right over that seam, and I'm going to press it as I go around, and it should squeeze out a lot of that slip. This is really just about reinforcing it and making sure that the seal is completely sealed, so that as we manipulate the egg later, that the air doesn't escape out. Okay, so I could get out my tool and pull some of the slip off, but I'm going to use my finger, because fingers are sometimes the best spatulas. Just because they conform to different shapes, right? Like, alright, so a couple of things that we can do with this is, one, I'm going to roll it on my cloth here to dry it out just a little bit. See if we can do that. Sometimes that doesn't work so good. You can take one of your wooden tools and paddle it. It probably needs to dry a little bit before I do much more with it, because with all the slip and the soft coil, it's pretty wet. So I'm going to let this sit overnight and firm up a little bit, and then tomorrow I can shape this more to the type of shape that I'm working on. Alright, I hope you guys enjoyed that. you know, there's nothing outrageously exciting about it, but, you know, it's good to know things. All right. Have a good night.